everyone. It's good to be back here again. We hope you are all doing well and have had a good start to the new year.
Sadashma, it's so good to be back in front of the mic again, though not gonna lie, I am feeling a little nervous.
I totally understand, Simon, but at the same time, we're also feeling very excited to be starting this year talking about loss and damage, the topic that flooded headlines during COP last year.
And as we take you with us into this conversation to better understand what loss and damage is, I am Simone.
And I'm Satashma, and this is Anthropos, a podcast where we bring you climate stories from around the world, focusing on BIPOC communities and the global south. Today, we are speaking with climate practitioners from the Loss and Damage Collaboration, which is a group of climate researchers, activists, lawyers from Global North and Global South. They work together to ensure that countries, communities, and people experiencing unequal impacts of climate change have the support they need to address loss and damage incidents.
I am very excited for this episode, Satashma. Should we explain what loss and damage is right now?
Actually, Saman, let's introduce our guests first and hear from them themselves. So today we have two co-founders of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition joining us, Eva and Hyacinthe. They're also co-coordinators of the Loss and Damage Collaboration.
And we also have Prakriti, a junior negotiator for the Loss and Damage Collaboration. And without any further ado, let's welcome them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. How are you doing?
Super amazing.
Good.
Sunny in Kigali.
We have our artist Iman joining us.
Hi, my name is Iman, and I am the artist for Anthropos, and I'm very inspired by the work that you all do. And my question is, what got you into it? What gets you out of bed and has you running around trying to save the environment? What are your stories?
Mine is a short one. I guess
Please
I'm a
go
nature
ahead.
girl. I like when I'm outside, so having something doing that protects the environment is like a happy thing for me. Because I love to be outside and explore, get away, going to new places like forests, nature. So yeah.
So my background is I did water and environmental engineering in undergraduate, and my master's in water management, specialized in water and wastewater technologies, and all courses I took are related to environmental protection. That's when I heard about climate change, the reality of climate change. So it was really an interesting topic to me. I wanted to learn more about how climate change can affect the water availability around the world. From finalizing my undergraduate, I joined the local organization called the Green Protector. That's like Eva. So that's where, our aim was to support young people to understand like environmental protection, how we can do it, how we can support the community from our country. I co-founded Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. So it's a long story, but it was really so amazing to see, first of all, to understand how it can support in raising the voices of the communities on the front lines of climate change around the world.
As Hyacinth said, I also have my academic background of environmental science, and I professionally and career-wise, academically, that is related to something to environmental science. But more than that, deep down, I think that I am guided by my name. My name is Prakriti. That means nature, and I have always been guided by this name. And so yeah, I'm just concerned about the future. So yeah, this keeps me motivated.
Thank you for your answers. I'm gonna hand it over to Satashma or Simone.
Thank you for getting us started, Iman. So now let's talk about loss and damage. We are very excited to talk about this relevant and timely topic. And let's start from the basics. What is loss and damage and why is it important?
So generally, loss and damage means residual impacts of climate change, which cannot be tackled by mitigation and adaptation measures. We, for example, I see like my country, Rwanda, is one of those countries that like conduct climate actions on the ground. We do mitigation, we do adaptation, but still we are facing some climate change impacts. So those residual impacts that were not cannot be able to be avoided by mitigation and adaptation. That's what we call loss and damage. Yeah, so it's really important because it is affecting different various communities around the world. They're negatively being affected mentally. That's non-economic loss and damage. They're losing their homes, cultural values, and everything. So it's important to recognize that that's going to, even though we practice mitigation measures and adaptation strategies, it's not going to, we are still going to face climate change. So we have to find the sustainable solutions to ensure that everything's like people's lives are not being lost, or their infrastructures and other stuff are not being lost. Loss and damage is being felt is affecting both developed and developing countries. All the countries have to work in solidarity to ensure that they address loss and damage.
For me, loss and damage is something that's happening around us. It's the negative impact of climate change that are not effectively addressed by the traditional adaptation measures that we already have. These impacts may include sea level rise, increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, and loss of biodiversity, and so on. These impacts affect vulnerable countries differently, such as small island country, least developed countries, and developing nations like Rwanda, like Nepal, which often lack the resources to effectively adapt to the changing climate. So as a result, it's very important to these countries to have a voice in international climate negotiation, for the international community to take meaningful action to address the loss and damage.
Yes, means the loss of crops, loss of houses, our schools, infrastructure, all those impacts that we're facing, because we're already in the era of climate change and we're facing the negative impacts of climate change. So all of that for me, that what means loss and damage.
I would like to say it's something very urgent that needs to be addressed as soon as possible without any further delays.
I totally agree that we have been hearing about loss and damage way more frequently than we did before. Although, like, for our listeners, and I'm sure you all know, but loss and damage is a thing that has been being discussed for decades. Like, it's been like 30 years. So you were there at the COP27 negotiations, so we would love an insider's perspective. What happened at COP27 with relation to loss and damage?
COP27 saw a historic win for vulnerable countries like ours that are already suffering from the effects of climate change. And after 30 years of negotiations, the world's leaders finally agreed to set up a loss and damage fund to help the countries recover from the climate disasters. So the COP discussed new funding arrangement and formed a transitional committee to figure out how to make the loss and damage fund operational before COP28. There are still a few tricky questions, like who pays the fund, and who receives the fund, and when, and how will the fund be structured and governed, and so on. But yes, I must say that we did a little progress in this agenda item this year.
COP27 agreed on the institutional arrangement of Santiago Network of Loss and Damage. Santiago Network is mandated to catalyze technical assistance to developing countries that are most vulnerable to climate change impacts. And it was established at COP25 it was a win to see institutional, like the parties agreeing on its institutional arrangements. And now at by COP28 it will start operating. The only issue on that is it's finance. It needs financial arrangement to operate. That's something the negotiators and parties are still discussing on. Hopefully by COP28 we'll know, like the parties will also agree on how finance can flow, so that the technical assistance can start being, catalyzed and operationalized.
COP27, I think the loss and damage gained the front page since COP26. So I think the relentless demand from civil societies, academia, scientific persons for the global leaders to address loss and damage made a huge difference during COP27, and we were able to have that the establishment of a loss and damage fund. And what again from all those experiences was that how important it is for not let it go, pushing. I think before COP27 there was different voices like we won't be having this COP27, won't be able to establish won't be able to establish the loss and damage finance facility. Let's push it for maybe next year, agree on different, there was different jargon coming up within the negotiation. But at the end, I saw how negotiators from developing countries or small islands push for it, and it became a reality. So I guess that for me was a great experience. Yeah.
Talking a little more about COP27, during this time we heard that words such as liability and compensation that often comes up when we talk about loss and damage were not part of the final text for the Loss and Damage Fund. And similarly, even historically, it has also been excluded in the text of the Paris Agreement. So if you look at Article 8 of Paris Agreement that talks about loss and damage, they exclude such language. So could you define what liability and compensation means to you? And what is the impact of not having these words in the final text?
So the liability in the context of climate change is the legal or moral responsibility of the developed nations, major emitters, and the private sectors for the harm they have caused to the vulnerable communities, vulnerable countries by climate change. So this can include both actual and potential damage caused by the impact of climate change. So the question of liability for climate change is very complex, and as you said, it's very controversial one, as there is ongoing debate over who should pay, who should be held responsible for the harm caused by climate change, and how the responsibility should be shared. However, there is no international legal framework to assign the liability of climate change impacts. The UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement recognize the need to address the loss and damage in vulnerable countries, but they do not establish any specific mechanism for liability or compensation. So the absence of the words liability and compensation in these kind of international climate agreements can make it more difficult for vulnerable countries to hold the actors accountable for the harm caused by climate change, and to secure the financial resources they need to adapt to the climate, to the changing climate. Yeah.
For me, what it means, like, a little bit shying away from responsibility. Loss and damage have been called for 30 years, and then we haven't been able to have it until COP27. And that's because also of those, how it has been politicized and everything. But I guess for me, it's a little bit shying away from responsibility, but then there is also this, how the system works and the way the Paris Agreement was agreed on, and was what it is. Yeah.
COP27 was historic in the sense that a loss and damage fund was created, but the fund is still, it's an empty bucket. It has like a lot of details still missing, or you can say to be decided. We want to let our listeners know as well that COP27, the outcome of it was a transitional committee was created, right, of 24 developing nations. And this transitional committee, they're supposed to meet in March to decide, okay, like the premise of this fund. So we expect increasing momentum in the operationalization of this fund, especially this year. So what do you think are some important decisions that this transitional committee must take to make sure that this fund does not remain empty and useless?
It means having a structure again, having making sure that the loss and damage fund is not just a name or a text in the decision, and now they should agree on the structure, and then how will it be able to mobilize resources so that it won't be able, like, always fundraising, fund a way to be able to make sure that there is resources in the fund and that resource actually reach the people that needs it in the community on the ground. So I think that for me, what's important is make sure that loss and damage finance that we've been calling for is there, it's a reality, and it's actually reaching the people that needs it most. Yeah. And along that way, it's like deciding on structure, governance, and everything, but keeping in mind that the needs of those who are affected by loss and damage will be benefit by the loss and damage fund.
Till now, like all countries have not yet nominated the members of the transitional committee. For me, which I say like somehow which might delay the process or the work of the transitional committee. But since their first meeting is in March, we can expect that maybe in February they can nominate everyone and organize everything. So from my end, I think they can everything that we discuss, they must do it as soon as possible and make sure that they don't delay. And I'm not sure. I wish also we can know who is going to pay for loss and damage funding. I'm hoping that by COP28, everything will be in place, and then it will start. Money will start flowing in it, like loss and damage fund.
Committee should encourage collaboration and coordination with other funds and initiatives addressing loss and damage, and also work closely with other actors such as private sector, CSOs, and local communities to ensure that the fund is reaching to those who are in need. And also the committee should ensure that the fund is complementary to other adaptation measures such as disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, to ensure that the fund is used in a way that that is most effective in addressing the needs of vulnerable countries. And also the committee may assist in building trust and transparency.
Thank you for your answers. I'm very excited to see what the transitional committee decides, but also to think about it in another way. The current geopolitical environment and the economy does pose a lot of uncertainties, right? We've seen a lot of things happen this year, from the energy crisis to the sovereign debt crisis in Sri Lanka. We've seen cryptocurrency being regulated. There's a lot that's been happening around. So, with this, a lot of different countries are going to prioritize and respond to the issues we've discussed very differently. How do you think this is going to impact the fund?
So the current geopolitical environment and economic uncertainties, as you said, may have a negative impact on the ability of countries to prioritize and fund the loss and damage efforts, making it more difficult for vulnerable countries to adapt to the impacts of climate change. With this economic uncertainty, countries may be more reluctant to provide financial assistance to loss and damage efforts, as they may be focused on addressing their own economic needs. So as you also said, we have been seeing energy inflation affected by Russia-Ukraine war, and so the current geopolitical environment may also impact how countries prioritize loss and damage. For example, countries may be more focused on other issues such as trade, security, and migration, which may take priority over the climate change issue.
Loss and damage is a priority, and it's a matter of security. When I don't think you'll be able to think long term without considering the impacts of climate change. I mean, in terms of development, economic development, like in the case of developing countries, if you're building a home or a school, then the next day it's not there, I think that won't be thinking in the long term. So I think the best way, I think loss and damage should be added. It's a priority and should be considered as such.
I think loss and damage, just echoing what Eva said, it should be also on top of priorities of the country. If they prioritize something else, then while people are dying, who is going to get that kind of service? Or, I mean, we have seen how loss and damage can be horrible, can affect the country's economy. So, in all priorities, it must be addressed. Loss and damage must be addressed urgently, and also in solidarity of all of the countries. This is not going to be just addressed by one country or one local or international organization. No, this is something that can be done in solidarity and in collaboration.
You all have left like such a strong message for us. Something that really stands out to me and also Simone is just that climate change is always seen as such a separate issue, but then it it affects migration, it affects food, it affects even like so many things really, and especially when it comes to the energy crisis. I mean, that was such a big awakening that we are highly dependent on fossil fuels. So it's just really interconnected. With that, we would like to end our episode with you. Thank you so much for joining us for this brief but very effective discussion. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you for inviting us. We are hoping that our voices will reach so many people.
Okay, guys, Sadashra and Iman, how do you guys feel after that conversation?
I feel pretty good. Yeah, that was honestly, of course, I feel like every time I get blown away by what our guests have to say, but this is such a new and important topic for us. And they were just a bunch of really cool girls who were doing just so much work for the environment and just climate justice. What about you, Iman?
Exactly. Piggybacking on what you said, Situ, the fact that it's very real stories, that's what I got, and for the first time I feel way more involved in the process. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. So yeah, I honestly did not know how much it means to them, and they clearly dedicate their lives to this. So it's really I'm blown away as well, and it was just amazing information to soak in.
Yeah, and I just think loss and damage is so new to me still. I'm not, I'm just familiarizing myself with the topic.
Yeah, same, absolutely.
What I was thinking about during the conversation was, I don't know if you guys remember, we shared this one TikTok on our Instagram. And it was about how Tuvalu's I think it was the foreign minister, and he was like, oh, our island is basically land is disappearing and we're turning into our first digital nation. So I was just thinking, yeah, there are quantifiable losses that the loss and damage could account for, but what about all these unquantifiable losses such as culture, indigenous solutions, and knowledge? Do you guys see loss and damage fund playing in a role in this side of damage as well?
Yeah, no, for sure. So the thing is that we already have a couple of failed climate funds, and Green Climate Fund being one of them. And that was like a small scale one, granted, but I think the main intention of, like ideally this loss and damage fund should be different in the sense that it, like thinks about non-economic impacts, like you said, like person's culture. Not just that, like people have literally lost their loved ones. Like they're never coming back, and that itself is a loss and damage impact, right? Without being considerate of these non-economic impacts, I don't think that the loss and damage fund just kind of remains very just like just a financial framework that's very exclusive of people's emotions and people's culture. But let's see.
I also think that coming from an artist's point of view, that and we are constantly working to conceptual and contemporary issues in the world. So I think it's amazing to think about loss and damage as not only something that is quantifiable, but something that goes beyond the lines of that. Because loss and damage, yes, there may be a fund, there may be, even if they were to put an infinite amount of resources, the fact that, as Tashma was saying, the fact that loved ones are gone, you can't do anything about that. And this is where artwork comes from, the inspiration to that someone's heart is literally smashed to pieces because their loved ones have disappeared. This is where true inspiration comes from, and getting their story out there is just something that I'm so excited to do now. There was actually a show that happened in the National Gallery in Singapore. Not related to the environment directly, but when the Australians had taken over, like completely colonized Tasmania, they had essentially razed to the ground crops, agriculture, and along with it homes and the surrounding environment and the biodiversity within it. So you would see that the people who it's beautiful, that it's beautiful because these people are not, they would not know themselves as artists, but the fact that they're sharing stories, and the fact that these indigenous people created totems and created this, just these shrines to people, is just an artwork in itself. So I'm excited to, I think the most prominent thing that I'm excited about is taking these non-artists and making them into artists themselves.
I guess I'm just excited to see what's gonna come out of this.
Yeah,
Hopefully it's good news.
yeah.
Yeah.
And looking forward to the artwork as well. I think that was really beautifully put, Iman. But thank you so much, guys. This was a really good conversation.
Thank you so much for listening to our episode today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did.
Please share our episode with your friends and family. We need to talk more about the climate crisis because it is already here.
Please follow us on Instagram and TikTok to keep the climate conversation going. Links will be attached below. See you next time.